every meeting. We're thrilled to have a wonderful presentation tonight from Coast Guard Auxiliary. And I want to start by first announcing next month we're going to have the meeting. It's our last meeting of the year, which is November. And Kyle Ouellette, who was one of our scholarship recipients for 4 years, who went to Embry-Riddle and now is flying for Delta Airlines at 767s.
That's cool.
He'll be our speaker, and he's really excited to come and see everybody again. Pat, he started out in Civil Air Patrol.
Yes. Yeah.
Went through everything. The next thing is in December. December 20th is the date of our holiday dinner. So mark it on your calendar. It's always fun. And we'll be at the same place we were at last year, which is the last 2 years. Worked out very well. The Hearth and Kettle in Yarmouth. And I wanted to review with you the menu because it's a buffet and there are a choice of 2 entrees, but you don't get one, you can get both entrees. So I want to read off what they are and just get a little vote of what people like, what they don't like, otherwise for me to pick it. The whole meal starts off with the chef's soup of the day, garden salad with your choice of dressing, and then the entree, which is either chicken pot pie, served on a flaky puff pastry with something that ran off the page, chicken parm topped with mozzarella and parmesan, baked scrod with cracker crumb dressing, roast turkey with cranberry sage dressing, or meatloaf served with butternut squash. So you've heard them all. What caught your ear the most? Raise your hand if on any of them. Raise it on all of them if you liked all of them. So then I'll just look around and figure, okay, we'll get that. Who likes chicken pot pie? 1. Chicken parm. 7. 8. Baked scrod. Wow.
That's a winner.
Roast turkey. Wow. And meatloaf. All right, so it's going to be turkey and scrod. Also, you get rice pilaf, a choice of rice pilaf, creamy mashed potatoes, fresh seasonal vegetables, and then for dessert, Indian pudding or apple crisp.
Apple crisp.
Done.
Indian pudding.
Oh, it's the chef's choice of soup of the day. Dishwater soup. It's delicious. So we want to thank the Mass Aerospace Museum for. Oh, yes. Richard. Oh, yeah. Let's start plugging that. The best thing about the dinner is not the food and the getting together with everybody. That's nice. But it's at the end of it, we have a slideshow where we show pictures that people of their aviation activities in the year gone by. If you've come to the thing, you know it's great. So we'd like everybody to send Richard, and we'll put it in the newsletter where to send it.
No problem, John. Richard and I are not going to be here. So we need somebody to.
Oh, well, that's news. So can they still send it to you and then you'll make the PowerPoint and then?
The couple we're leaving.
With that picture we were.
Early is very, very well.
So we'll plug it with the November meeting, and I'll ask Erica found a way.
It's too big to email
Where
us.
are you going? Oh, yes.
One of my children, I need a scorecard.
Wonderful. I hope you have a great time. So everyone knows Lucy. She's our membership director. She does a phenomenal job. She, after flying for many years, is now flying for Cape Air because she got bored. Yes. Well, that's true. Right. All right. So the next thing is let's get going with the meeting, and I'd like to introduce Keith Young, who's the executive director and the chair mover of the Mass Air and Space Museum.
Yeah.
And then Keith will introduce Pat, will introduce Captain.
So thank you. Yes, I am the interim executive director, which basically means I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. If it's broken, it's my fault. If it's working, that's great. So I'm happy that everyone is here. This is really the first time that we've used this room for what it was designed for. And it was designed for this, to be able to share the aviation experience with people who are interested. So I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that next Thursday night, on the 12th, we are going to have a gentleman, his name is Hugh Blair Smith, who wrote a book. It's called Left Brains for the Right Stuff. And that is also free. You can come here into this room. He's going to be doing a presentation on his book. He was one of the people who worked on the Apollo control module computer. And so it's very interesting. I'm in the process of reading the book now. So I invite everyone to come back a week from tomorrow night. The museum opened less than a year ago in this location. We have had around, I think it's 6,000 people who've come through the museum. And so we've had a lot of exposure to people, but one of the things that we need is we need volunteers. We need people who are willing to come in and put in a couple of hours a week to just meet with those individuals who come through the door and sort of expose them to the aviation and space experience. Now, I will tell you that most of the people who come in have no experience in either aviation or space, and we get them that exposure. And one of the people who has been volunteering here is Pat McNamara, and I'm going to ask Pat to come up so that he can introduce our tonight's speaker.
Thank you. Thanks, Keith. That was resounding. Anyway, I'm Pat McNamara. My official job here tonight is the CAPA program coordinator. So I'm also a member of the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and I have the pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this evening, Captain Rob Potter. He's the commanding officer of Air Station Cape Cod. Along with us tonight, we have Lieutenant Billy Barton and Lieutenant Zach Farrell. Both of these gentlemen are his aide de camp, so don't mess with him because he's got some. Also, I just want to introduce Mike Hennessy is a Coast Guard Auxiliary member, as am I, and Kathleen is also a Coast Guard Auxiliary member. And if anybody's interested, we have these little trifold brochures if anybody's interested in exploring what the Coast Guard Auxiliary has to do. So with that,
Cool.
Captain,
Thanks, Pat.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good everyone. First, just want to say really a warm welcome to you. So thank you for having me tonight. And actually, from the director, sir, thank you. Where'd you go? Oh, there. Thanks for having this at the museum tonight.
Sure.
This is a great spot. And to Pat, better know you as Mac, and Michael. Thank you for the invite coming tonight. All right. So first, I'll kind of take a second. All right. Yeah, that might help.
I don't know.
Oh, that's perfect.
Pat, how did that work?
Good. That's great. So, as Mike said, I'm Captain Rob Potter. I am lucky enough to be the CEO of the air station. Don't listen to what they say. All right. No. So I came in 2 years ago. I've got 1 more year before the change of command is going to be probably sometime in July of 2024. So So the Coast Guard uses Navy Flight School. So I cut my teeth just as most Coast Guard aviators do through Pensacola, and made my way up. Served in Clearwater, Florida. Flew through Hurricane Katrina. That's It's like, feels like forever ago now. And then went up to Astoria, Oregon, where I flew through Cape Disappointment, up and down the Columbia River, and found out how mean the Pacific Ocean can really be. And it is dark out there. After that, went to flight school, was in Mobile, well, our flight school anyway, in Mobile, Alabama, where I taught all the new kids coming right out of flight school how to fly the H-60. That's where I cut my teeth was with the H-60 helicopter. If you're not familiar, take a Black Hawk down, paint it orange and white, and there you got it. I had a couple of skill things to it. And then one of the unique parts about being a Coast Guard officer and an aviator is we're expected to get outside of the cockpit. So I had a couple staff tours, one of which was I was a Senate liaison for 2 years and worked in the basement of the Russell building on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. So I can attest to all the craziness that's kind of happening on Capitol Hill right now. Kind of been there, been through it. And after that job, went over to, I had the real arduous duty in living in San Diego, right there on Point Loma where Top Gun was filmed, the first one. Yeah, arduous. So I did that for several years. Then actually I was lucky enough to get a scholarship for a fellowship at Harvard. Studied there for a year, went back down to headquarters, for a couple of years and did officer assignments, and then I ended up here at the air station. So been a wonderful career, and again, as I mentioned, all flying all H-60s helicopters until I came here because I knew all the 60 pilots. I taught them half their tricks. So, but what I didn't know is the 144 side of the house, or what our fixed wing assets are. So I really wanted to understand those. So when it came for the time of asking for, because I've got to give all the waivers as a commanding officer. So when it came to like a flight gradient or a climb gradient or whatever it might be, I just wanted to know for sure I knew what I was talking about. So I flew through the help of Billy. Billy's one of our aircraft commanders on the 144 side. He's teaching me a bunch. So that's kind of me in the background. But more important, let's talk about the air station. Let's talk about our mission. So our mission, so the Coast Guard is spread out all throughout the country. It's everywhere, even overseas. And if I look at what our mission is here, we cover for our own air station with 6 aircraft from New York all the way to Canada and sometimes beyond. So that's what we do. So part of being the CEO of the air station is it's also a requirement that I'm an aviator. So with that hat on, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for your professionalism. We share the skies, and especially in this area that is known for weather changing pretty quick, and also it's layered with different types of airspace. Thanks for being professionals out there and working with our crews as we navigate this airspace we call home. But let's talk about the Coast Guard for a second. I like to think of our service as the small but yet mighty service. To put it in context, we are smaller than the New York City Police Department. So one city, we're smaller. We're not too much larger than what shows up to the Pentagon every day. So roughly about 25,000 people show up there. That's what the Metro brings in every day. And then here's the great part thing. Here's the good part about it is if we ever go to this Pats game and the Pats only do the game just for the Coast Guard, you're all coming. Bring all your friends, bring our families, bring your families, bring everybody that you know, and no one is going to be in the cheap seats. We'll like be right on the couple rings. So we've got it good. But yet, even though we are kind of small, we've been in every single major war. We've been alongside our deep counterparts, serving in the Middle East, Guantanamo Bay, the Western Pacific Ocean, Indo-PACOM. And we also operate the sole icebreaker that's going down to the Antarctic. But let's kind of bring it a little bit closer. Let's talk about our own hometown in New England. So essentially, if we look at New England, and really from that, we're looking at New York from Canada, it's divided up in 5 different major areas, and we call those sectors, right? Now, what the sector's job is when there was a Mayday case, when there's anything that goes on, they will take those radio calls to determine what the best way to respond to that call is, and then they'll dispatch the assets. We are one of those assets that get dispatched. So as you might imagine, our work takes us up and down the coast, and it takes us all over the place, even inland over to Michigan and as far south as the Caribbean. So we're humbly outfitted, as I mentioned earlier, with 3H helicopters. So many, many moons ago, we upgraded it from the J model to the T model. And I got to tell you, I think I'm the last J model pilot at the air station. So back those days, we had little gauges that actually worked. Now everything's flat screen. So I can at least brag about that and be like, yeah, when I was flying, the needles actually moved. But so on the fixed wing side, we have 3 HC-144 twin engine prop aircraft. It's currently undergoing a aircraft modifications from an Alpha model over to the Bravo model. And essentially what it is, really the big game for us is all the instrumentation of the back. So the entire sensor package got a complete upgrade. So we're talking from basically like Atari, Nintendo days, not quite to what they have now, but at least like a solid one of the first PlayStation. So we're not doing that. So we're not doing too bad. And up in the front too is kind of what the pilot speak is. We're adding ADS-B. We're also adding the ability to shoot precision GPS approaches now. So it's really great. And in all that, we support it with less than 180 people that's at the air station. So our work really takes us through many different missions and many different phases of flight. We'll fly law enforcement patrols every day to ensure that the fishermen are fishing in the right areas and protect the fishing fleet. It's a $13 to $15 billion industry, and we're here to protect that. Everything from the oil spills, if there is an oil spill, we'll make sure that if the oil is heading towards land, that those areas, those sensitive areas, are protected. We'll deploy down to the Caribbean to stop drugs that are coming into the United States and also stop the human traffickers that put so many lives in jeopardy. But even if I bring it even closer, here locally, we've even made it back. A couple of years ago, we stopped thousands of pills and confiscated thousands of dollars of illegal drugs that were headed over to Nantucket. We have rescued and landed on Mass General helipad more times than I can count. And recently, we also played a part in the submarine that sagically had its tragic end over the Titanic. But tonight, what I want to do is I want to tell you a story of what we're best known for, and that's search and rescue. A story where several crews were needed to save 31 lives. They were aboard a 140-foot fishing trawler called the Atlantic Destiny. The date was March 2nd, 2021. There was a fire in the ship's engine room that left the vessel without propulsion or steering. It started also taking on water. The weather was terrible. Seas were as high as a 3-story building, making that 143-foot boat that is thousands of pounds of steel look like a bathroom fistful. Without propulsion, if you know, all vessels are going to go beam 2, which means instead of going through the waves and having control over the boat, you're now beam to the waves and you're going up with the crest, down in the troughs, and you move back and forth. Well, for those who've ever seen that, maybe a sailboat, and if you're a helicopter flying over top of that trying to rescue people from the deck, that 80-foot mast just became a steel wrecking ball that is trying to take you out of the sky. So I'm going to show you in a second here, I'm going to show you a video of this case. But as you watch it, there's a couple things that I want you to look for and a couple points I want to make. So first and foremost, this case was a normal Tuesday. This case could happen tonight. We have 2 crews that night that were working on flight elevations, that were working on flight different profiles to work on their night proficiency. There was no notice. There was no heads up. The crews had little time to plan, and they were responding within minutes of the call. This case required both the Canadian and the United States Coast Guard. So as you watch it, please know there's a gentleman who's going to be sitting down in front of a yellow helicopter with this really cool beret on. That's SAR technician Nisbet. So he's basically the Canadian version of a rescue swimmer. This video does not do his story, and I'll bring his story to life afterwards. So this video highlights the helicopter crews, but there was also a 144 crew from Air Station Cape Cod that was flying on it, and additionally a C-130 that was flying out of Canada. Those crews we send out there, especially on the long-range cases, to orbit above them to serve as a comms platform. Once you get that far offshore and you're at 30 feet, VHF and UHF radios that rely on line of sight are really not that effective. And it's really good to have that aircraft above you, and they will coordinate airspace, they'll coordinate all the questions that go on so the helicopter crews can focus on what they're doing, right? And God forbid if anything happens to the helicopter crew, that fixed wing asset will just take the search out of search and rescue.
I was laying in my bunk and I felt the whole boat shake 4 levels up. This was something beyond what I could fathom. 60-knot winds, 30-foot seas. I knew it was going to take everything that Canada and the United States Coast Guard had.
ARC Search and Rescue Longer. We were alerted through our Coast Guard radio station that a vessel was on fire. Due to the weather and the circumstances behind their distress, we reached out to our SARPA, the U.S. Coast Guard.
They said it was taking on water approximately 200 miles or more off of Cape Cod. So we launched to go 200 miles offshore into the dark system. When you look down at the vessel in distress, the Atlantic Destiny, it was just out of control. It was just at the mercy of the wind and the waves.
It's not every day you get to see a large vessel like that being battered by a significant sea state. You've seen in the faces there, you start to be concerned. Some of the older guys, they've been around, they know how many vessels get lost out here. You know, they've been around the block.
I kept thinking that I wanted to get home. And knowing that there was people being lifted and going home gave me hope that I would join them as well. We were still trying to rescue people, and then my helicopter ended up having a major malfunction. I had to make the choice to leave my own crew members on that vessel and leave with who I had on board and try and make it back to shore.
Helicopter's gone, nothing I can do about that. This rescue still needs to happen, and I could see the Jayhawks starting to come in. And we have to now divide and conquer with both 60s.
We moved in position. We jettisoned our mass rescue operations craft and deployed our pump to the vessel in order to make room for all suppliers.
I could hear over all the noise and through my headset, all the guys in the back just cheering. Like, as you know, I'm pulling another person in. Hearing that, like, okay, we can get one more. We can get one more. So that's what we did.
We are honored to be with you today to talk about some extraordinary Coast Guard men and women that did extraordinary things.
It was teamwork at its finest. I mean, by every agency involved, something went wrong at every step, and it was rectified, and we just kept going to the point where everyone made it back to shore. Everybody took their job seriously and made sure that we were all going to get home safe.
It makes everything worth it being able to see a family reunited after a case like that.
Pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are the cases that movies are made from. These are the stories these air crews are going to share forever. They're going to pass down from their kids to their kids. These crews were awarded the Coast Guard's Distinguished Flying Cross. And for those who may not be familiar, it's not too many far down from the Congressional Medal of Honor. It is the highest award that the Coast Guard can put on any aviation crew. This crew actually won nearly every search and rescue award from 2021 and 2022. They were hosted by the International Helicopter Association in Dallas twice. They were flown to London by the International Maritime Organization in England, and they also won, they were the first United States crew ever to win the Canadian Rescue of the Year award. But if you ask the crews, it's Tuesday. It's what we do. Except for the two survival technicians, the first one that I pointed out, the one with the beret, let me tell you their story. All right, he quickly stated in the video that, you know, he said like the helo's gone, can't do anything about that. But let me kind of unfold it. Let me unpack that a little bit. So when this when this case first came in, the Canadian Coast Guard was the first on scene. They got on scene. They had two SARTECs, or rescue swimmers, that went on board. Both of those gentlemen first went down first. SARTEC Nisbet was one of the two. Right. So now 31, we're up to 33 people on board. Right. So when the Canadian helicopter was there, they got 6 people up. Okay, now we're down to 25. Shortly after that, you mentioned, we heard him say he suffered a hydraulic malfunction. Well, essentially, they started leaking oil, and it was worried that it was going to be a catastrophic failure. So that helicopter had to stop hoisting operations and immediately head for home. The 2 SARTECs were still on board, right? So now we've got 27 people that need to be rescued. The C-130 that was overhead initially had to follow them back. So now the departure of the helicopter's gone. C-130's gone. 27 people are on board. It's dark and it's quiet. 25 survivors, 2 SARTECs. This is what I love about our people. If you've ever met a rescue swimmer or a SARTEC, you kind of heard them like, Kilo's gone, I got to focus on that. Those folks were on there. They didn't know when the next rescue was going to come, and they were facing the harsh reality that they might go down with the ship. But our SARTECs, not our swimmers. They were looking those 25 people in the eye, and they gave them the confidence that they were not going to find their last day on that ship. The SARTECs were going home. They were going home, and not on their watch were they going to let anything happen to those 25 people. And they didn't. Soon, within a couple minutes, there's a light on the horizon. It was a Coast Guard 860. Then there was another one. Then there was the unmistakable sound of a Jayhawk helicopter closing in and starting to orbit the boat and finally coming into a hover boat. The crew, after talking with them, man, they had those engines going as hard as they could. TOT, ITT was at the limit, and I'm sure they had a couple red chiclets there as they were transiting the scene. As they got on, the crews made as much room in the back as they could. They got rid of the pump. They got rid of this big raft that's in the back. The first helicopter came in, they hoisted 8. The second got 13. And at that point, we were full. 8 plus 13, 21. Still 6. Plus, 4 survivors in the 2 SARTECs. As all this was going on, Canada launched another helicopter. So again, if we look at the crews, 2 SARTECs, 4 people, it's dark, it's getting colder, and it's still really, really cold. Another Canadian helicopter showed up, but as soon as it showed up, they ran into a hoist issue. They too had to return back home. So this is the 4th helicopter that's been out there that night. This crew's been doing it for hours. And this is the boat as we're looking at it, starting to lean over a little bit more. Walls become bulkheads, bulkheads become ceilings. It's less and less comfortable. So thankfully, the Coast Guard had the foresight also, as all this was going on, to divert one of their vessels called the Cape Rogers. That vessel actually took these 2 pictures, and they're also able to get the last remaining 4, and of course, the SARTECs were the last 2 to come off. As I watched the video, I can't help to think to myself, this is what we do. And of course, I got my commanding officer hat on. I'm looking at the risk analysis. I'm looking at, do we have the assets? Are the crew trained? Do we do the right things? Is there anything I'm not thinking about to make sure that we can bring both these 31 people home and everybody that was on one of those helicopters, one of those assets, just to make sure that we are all safe? But that's with my CEO hat. The other part of this is I got to think of the reason, really the real reason why we do this. And if you notice, there's 2 scenes in there. One of the scenes was from our flight mech. His name is Adam Nisk. He was one of the flight mechs that hoisted 13 people from that boat. During that award ceremony where the Commandant, the 4-star Admiral of the Coast Guard, the highest ranking officer in the Coast Guard, was pinning awards on their chest, afterwards, he had his son in his arms. And as we started to, the initial first people, one of the first survivors that we talked to, he was also seen with his son in his arms. So ladies and gentlemen, that's what we do. We don't do it for the medals. We don't do it for the recognition. We don't do it because you might end up in the video. We do it because we're also fathers, we're brothers, we're sons, we're mothers. And it's our job to make sure that we bring people home. We bring them back. And that is why we do it. So I'll end with this. We're hiring. So if anybody knows anybody that might be interested in the Coast Guard, please, we need good folks in our service. So anybody really, we're kind of shooting for the high school age. So if anybody you think might be interested, please. It's a great service. We've got a really good work quality. We've got some really, really good people in our service. Really, really good folks. But you know what? The other part too is there's also room for you too. As Pat mentioned, we've got our Coast Guard auxiliary and we have an air component of that. So we do a lot of different work from different patrols. Once in a while, we'll request to help to move people, especially if we have to do notifications of families that are on small islands or whatever. There's a slew of different things that we do. So if that might be something that you're interested, we pay for the gas. So by all means, Mac's a great point of contact to kind of, to see what we might do. But I also wanted to say thank you, like sincerely, thanks for having me over tonight. I love telling our story. It's great, especially like this. This is wonderful stuff. But here's that's the good stuff. That is a helo dropping off some of the survivors from that thing. So it's really, really cool. It's great stuff. So we've got Billy and Zach. Zach and I were stationed in San Diego together, which was a lot of fun. So he is a good pilot. I trained him. I can attest to that. But no, nonetheless. So sincerely, thanks for having me over tonight. I know these guys. They're both from our safety department. So if you want to talk any safety stuff, we're happy to do that too. But I think, Mac, if I've got extra time, I'm happy to take any questions or talk about sea stories or anything else that you'd like. But thanks for having us out tonight.
Are there any stations in Maine that you call for assistance? Or is
There
this just it?
are. So let's see, if I look at Maine, so there's no aviation units up there. It's just us this here in Cape Cod. But there are, so if you ever fly over or if you've ever flown over or kind of been around the coast, there's small boat stations everywhere. Like we've got them in Woods Holes, Cape Cod Canal. They're littered all throughout the Northeast. Some of the larger boats that we have are mainly like 87 feet and above, are all out of Boston. So we've got some of our larger boats there, but as far as aircraft goes, we're the only show.
Oh, you're the only one in New England.
We're the only one in New England. Correct. Yeah, 3 helicopters and 3 144s. We cover all of New England. Yeah, it gets busy. We're actually, literally, as right before we started, I had to take a phone call. We were just searching for 2 folks missing in the water with both the 60 and the 144, 20 minutes ago. So yeah, there's a tendency to get busy.
Wow.
Sir, you mentioned the upgraded equipment that's getting put in the back of the 144.
Yes.
What is that equipment going to be able to do that's not already being done? And does that coordination with communication, is that what they?
It's a huge thing. So really, so what we've got now, and Billy, you can back up on this too. All right, so the old version that we had was pretty much like, the 144 is a palletized aircraft, so you can slide pallets in and out of it. So this was a sensor bank that was put on there. What it takes fairly good pictures. What it doesn't have is it doesn't have the ability to like track on a target. So you kind of have to fly the FLIR, the infrared and the camera the entire time through the joystick. It also didn't have great communications with ground. So, and 2, also the radar itself got upgraded. So we've got better radar coverage. The way that radar is displayed is a lot better. Instead of, it really did require 2 people, one to work the camera, the other one to work the radar. That is all combined into one. So it's basically kind of looks like a old arcade console with 2 different screens, and everything can be operated by 1 person, but usually we split it between 2. But one of the greatest things that we're going to get out of it, it does have a real-time link with the ground. And that fits into a bigger system called the Minotaur system. So any plane that has a Minotaur system, they all talk and they all communicate. So even if we're not doing a patrol, we're just flying around doing whatever, whatever mission we might be working on, from an instrument trainer to a pattern beater. That system is always picking up information, all types of electronic information, and it's sharing it with everyone. And most importantly, it's sharing it in a database. So if we ever want to go track like a certain vessel, we can pull that up and we can look at every single hit anytime not our plane, but any plane ever pick that up, and we'll be able to track it. So the situational awareness that we're building with this aircraft and the system is light years upon what we did have with the Alpha. So it's a lot better. Great question. Thanks, man.
No sneaking anywhere.
Not anymore.
So how many rescues a year do you guys do?
We're about 300 a year is what we're about. So we average a little bit less than one a day. Now, granted, that will go up and down, but that's right about where we're at.
What are the most common?
Medevacs off of a lot of the islands. Anybody fly from Boston Med flight by chance? All right, so as soon as the weather gets bad, they call us.
Yeah, it is. So as soon as the field
Goes
goes,
IFR, we get a phone call. So that's where a lot of our cases go to, just because, you know, in the wintertime, the weather does get bad. So Block Island, everywhere from Block Island up and down, you know, really anywhere that has to be transported, we'll take it. Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket probably keep us the busiest. And we'll cycle depending upon what the patient needs. We'll either put them in a 144 or put them in 60. So that's probably our most common rescue that we do. But we'll also do, we've had during when Hurricane Lee came up, we picked up two folks off of a sailboat that was on its way towards shore and crashing into the ground or crashing into the shore. Saved those two. You guys didn't say that. Were you on that one? So we did that. That one wasn't too long ago. Search for a person in the water just today. So now that we kind of vary what our rescues are, but a lot of medevacs, a lot of searching. Long range medevacs too, especially off cruise ships, especially in the summertime. We get a lot of those. Yeah, a lot of those. Yeah.
What's the range of the oceans that makes?
So it's you want to take this question?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thanks, Captain. Yeah, so it's CASA, it's a Spanish company. And the range is about 500 miles offshore. So we have about just shy of 1,000. But typically with the case set that we have, it's kind of a radius of 500 nautical miles offshore. Right? So it was a bit of a stretch for the submarine. So that's why a lot of people will bring that up. And, yeah, we were able to help out, but we weren't able to make it all the way out there.
No. We're kind of doing logistics and missions on the back end. But I think our longest range case was probably about, I think, 500 miles offshore. So it was two folks in a sailing vessel that were on their way, actually coming from Germany to the United States. And in order to get there, so we had to fly the 250 miles offshore, land on the back of a Coast Guard cutter, fuel, get more gas, fly another 200 miles out, hoist the two people off of the sailboat, fly back to the cutter, get more fuel, get the medical care for the patients, take off again and fly another 250 miles off. We got lucky because the boat just happened to be like right in the middle. I remember Ops called me. He's like, "Hey, sir, you're never going to believe this, but we have the cutter exactly where we need them." And we just so happened, so the pilot that was flying it, it was his last duty day before going off to school. And he was still qualified. He had like another month until his deck landing quals expired because they expire every year. So last duty day, boat happened in the right spot. You know, we had the right crew. Actually, believe it or not, both of those guys were back-to-back pilot of the years, 2021, 2022. So I'm like, all right, they got this one. So yeah, so they pulled that one off. That was a long rescue. That was probably the longest one I've ever been. So the sailboat, I had some mechanical issues, got caught in the weather. And additionally to one of the, they jibed, and for you, those who are not familiar with sailing, basically it's when the wind is behind you and the boom's on one side, and then they lose attention to the wind, and as they go back, the boom slams over to the other side, and that broke the rig, broke somebody's back, and also broke the leg. So we were picking up the two folks that had the, yeah, a long way to go.
that's why they call it a boom.
I know, exactly, right? It was a boom. Sorry. Please. If you are light and flying downhill, it'll get you about, what, 145-ish?
Knots?
Yeah, 145 knots, but you gotta push it. So it's not, I mean, really, that's only sprinting for it. Most of the time, we keep it about 125.
And when you're taking someone up And if it's linked, where do you typically land go?
So typically we'll take them over to Hanscom because Hanscom is where the base of Boston Med Flight is, and they've got like a trauma center there. Plus their ambulances are pretty impressive. So that way, that is actually the fastest way to get them to a higher level of care in the ambulance from what we have in the 144. And then they will be able to provide care on the way to Boston, wherever it might be. So typically we'll do that if it's really bad in Boston and we can't get into the helo pads on top of any of the hospitals. Especially if we got to keep them above below a certain altitude because we'll increase the pressure in the 144 to keep that pressure on. Because a helicopter is not, it's not pressurized. You know, to fly the approach, you got to get up to 35, 4,000 feet, depending upon which one you're doing. And especially with, you know, head injuries or something like that, we want to keep that pressure lower. So that's why we use the 144. So yeah, great questions. This is good stuff.
So you're taking every time you
For the yeah. What? How old is Oscar? Oscar's.
He's up we don't even know Oscar. We just know he's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, Oscar. Yeah, he's a legend.
But yeah, absolutely, yes, sir.
I'll talk to you.
That sounds good.
Sir. Those last two pictures you showed, you know, with the fishing, you know, ship going down.
Yeah.
When were the last folks rescued? What state was the boat in? I mean, I'm assuming that everybody was off the boat when it was upside down like that.
It was, yes, sir. Thankfully. Thankfully. It's taking its time warming up here. So it was. Oh, okay. All right. So when they pulled the last ones off, it was a little bit better than what this. So by helicopter or by boat. So when the last four came off, it looked like that. This was not too long afterwards. The helicopter was a little bit better, but not by too much.
So was it during the day or did they get rescued at night?
So the helicopter rescued at night, boats got them off during the day.
Oh, so they had to wait till dawn. Huh?
All night.
Oh, wow, this
Yeah.
one just dreadful.
Yeah, that's where those crews were.
You have a big light that they call a Carolina moon.
So on the helicopters,
Yeah.
we do. Yeah, we certainly do. So that's it's for the helos. It's really a dance how you get the lighting done, because all the pilots typically will have on night vision goggles. So kind of the less light, almost the better. But then again, the flight mech, the hoist operator does not have goggles on. So it's a real balance between just getting the right amount of, the right amount of light so the hoist operator can see what they're doing, but then not blinding the pilots in front. But so thankfully the 60's got it's got several different, it has two different lights up in the front. It's got a search light on the bottom of it. And initially it has this other thing on the side called a tracker beam, which is like, that thing is super bright. So much so it actually has mechanical stops, because if the light goes directly to the paint, it'll start to melt. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, you can light up, man. It's pretty bright.
That's how you stop the survivors in the water.
That's one way to do it. The additional way too that we'll do it is that has an NVG filter on it too. So the pilots under NVGs can actually search for different things. So most of the time when we find them, especially in this case, you would be amazed on how far you can see a strobe light out, especially on night vision goggles. I remember I was responding to a fire. It was a vessel on fire. I climbed up to 8,000 feet and we saw them 100 miles away.
Wow.
It's granted, it was a tiny, tiny, tiny little light, but we're like, that's them
With the NVG.
with the NVGs on. Yeah. Yeah, they're great. Now they work green, now they're white, they're white phospho. They're a really good tool. Really, really good tool.
So when the last folks were rescued by boat,
Yes.
how do they get the folks off the boat? I mean, it's kind of windy there and a little
Real
windy.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And so what do they get onto a raft or, in order to transfer? To the,
So
rescue ship?
it really kind of depends on what situation it is, right? So if they do have rafts, you can see the raft here. Rafts work if the boat's low enough and if it's going the right way. So this boat was big enough, so it's not gonna flip. But getting people off a boat is tough. Yeah. So I'll compare this one to like a lobster boat that we see out like in town, right? So if we have a lobster boat going into town and say it's listened to its port side, so essentially that gunnel is about, or the side of the boat, we have to be really, really careful, because if we get too many people on that downward side, it's gonna put too much weight. And once that water starts coming over that side of the boat or the gunnel, game over. That boat is going down, flipping, and everybody's gonna be in the water. So really the best thing to do, and it's kind of a little counterintuitive, but it's to move everybody up to the highest side of the boat and one by one bring them off the stern. So if they have a stern of the bow, depending upon what the conditions are, if they can jump into a life raft, that's great. Sometimes actually if they're in Gumby suits, which are these big red ones, getting them into the water is a lot of times the safest way to do it. If they could jump from the boat, that's great, but there's also fire hoses we've used. Fire hoses actually work really, really well because it's big enough you can kind of slide down on it. Fire hooks work really well. We've had crews jump in the water before, but especially if we're dealing with a sailboat, that actually looks really good from a helo point of view. We'll have the swimmer go out and throw a line up the back with the buoy, and then the swimmer will jump off, the patient will jump off. They'll bring them out to a little bit towards the helo, and then the swimmer will swim over to the line or the life raft that we've left and get back to the boat. So a couple different options. It really kind of depends what state of the vessel is. Fishing boats are really tough because if you ever seen the stern of a fishing boat, ankling, there's fishing gear all over the place, and especially it's slimy. It can be hard, and usually there's rigging. Can't probably see too much, but there's rigging all over the back of it. So it's believe me, they're made for fishing, not for helicopter operations. Which I get stuck, man.
I will see your rescue fishing boats or pleasure boats or.
For us, typically, it's usually we do the fishing boats, the ones that are a little further offshore. The recreational boats are typically closer to land, and most of the time, the small boats, like the ones you kind of see zipping around with the orange hulls, those are the ones we'll do mainly those rescues. It's just safer for those guys to do it. They'll call us many times if the boat gets onto the rocks that they can't get them from. If they can't get them from the water, then they'll call us. And so we call them boaties, all the boat operators, they hate it because they're like, all right, call the Airedales. All right, we didn't get there in time. We're like, no worries, boys, we got it. But so typically a lot of the recreational boaters, all of our small boat stations. Sir.
Boats must be constantly trained.
We do. Yep, the majority of the hours that we fly, 60% of the hours that we fly are for training. Yeah, it's for a couple things. One is we have to be proficient. So if we just look at this case, so they left IFR, so we have to be proficient in IFR. And then there's all the fuel calculations for getting all the way out there. And then there is, so many times, like if they've got to search for the boat, this one obviously was a lot easier to find, but if they got to search for the boat, now we have to utilize the software within the aircraft so we have to practice to put that in. Because it's many times you put an approach in, now you have to put a search pattern in. You got to know how to do survivor relocation patterns and everything else that might come into it. So that's another skill. And now, typically you have to fly an approach that you have to make in the computer to fly down to the boat just to get from like 300 feet down to 50 feet, especially in that night because it's so dark. So it's an instrument approach down to that. And then you finally get into the hoist operations. So you got to learn how to hoist through a boat day and night, sailboats day and night, do rescue swimmer operations day and night, get people out of the water day and night. And oh, by the way, then you got this one. All right, good luck. So all those operations that basically do the same thing in reverse. In addition to that, especially for the helicopter crews, they have we service all of the 8's navigation for buoys. Zach, you just got back from 3 days in Maine, where he was flying at lighthouses, moving batteries, moving lights, moving all types of good stuff. He wouldn't take me. I'm not happy about it, but they did. So you guys moved all types of stuff, right?
We did. Yeah, so we spent 2 days in Maine with small boat station, Southwest Harbor, located very close to Bar Harbor. And we actually have a Coast Guard auxiliarist that is like the world's leading expert on lighthouses. So it's kind of fun. He was giving us lighthouse trivia while we were flying around. But we basically flew with kind of you consider him like a master electrician. We would go to various lighthouses. We would drop off these electricians. We would have fresh batteries with us that they would go and swap old batteries or you know, maybe they're changing the light bulb to an LED. Basically, we were just giving them half an hour or so at each lighthouse. And they would do their annual or biannual maintenance. And then we would take all the old batteries, load them up in a big heavy duty plastic container and put a net around that and sling load that from the bottom of the helicopter back to Bar Harbor so that that stuff could be recycled. Yeah.
So yeah, and that, all that training time is 15 pilots. So yeah, there's a lot. Sure.
In this particular case, obviously, these are fellows out there working and they're just trying to make a living. There's plenty of weekend warrior sailors that are out there that get in trouble. Is there any liability that these guys incur when they need you to save their bacon?
Yeah, so we, I gotta tell you, so the Coast Guard has never charged for a search and rescue. We don't charge, we're not Towboat US, we'll come get you, if you call us, we'll get you. So really, no, we don't, well, if you need help, we'll go. If it's a hoax, I wish you the best, because you're getting charged, and those aircraft are not cheap. So it is a hefty six-figure bill if we don't add a couple commas to it. So yeah, so really, if whether from Mexico to Canada, and if you're a mariner in distress, we'll help you.
Even if they did something incredibly stupid. Come on, let that go.
Natural progression sometimes. Okay.
Can you tell me how much time it took to tackle the ship that was in distress call help from the Coast Guard lead station?
Sure. So both units were about 200 miles. So typically when the call kind of comes in, so the radio call will come in, it takes a couple minutes to kind of figure out, what did they say? Where are they going? How many people, what have you done so far to kind of get the basic information? That takes a couple minutes. And then they call both air stations. We hit the alarm. Literally, it's like a Firehawks model. We hit the alarm, all the crews go racing. Our goal is to get the fuel planning done, everything in the helicopter airborne or the 144 airborne within about 30 minutes. So it seems like forever, especially, when police show up at your house in 3 minutes, or 4 minutes or whatever it might be. But there's a lot that goes into getting this, getting that, making sure the checks. There's a lot of checks that we do, because that's the worst thing is you show up and like the Canadians had, granted, it wasn't their fault, but we don't want the hoist to fail. We'd much rather know that ahead of time, get a new helicopter, get out there. So knowing that, so they were going about 140-ish on the way out there, 200 miles. So it took about an hour and a half, so roughly 2 hours-ish from when we got the call to when they were on scene. Yeah, right around there, a little bit longer, which that's a long time if you're on a boat that's sinking. That is a long. So we do, yeah, we certainly do, because what that does is that allows a master to understand what precautions he needs to take and what time we're going to get there. Because if he's like, hey, we're on our way, and we don't give them time, and that boat looks like that, he goes, all right, man, I got to do something different. So no, we do our best to get updated comms with them. And that's one of the reasons we'll send the 144 and the fixed wings out ahead of time, the faster the helicopters are. And that we can get comms with the boat. So we have a real-time queue of what's going on. And then the helicopter will talk to 144, 144 will talk to the vessel in distress. So we can know exactly what's going on, basically give a play-by-play of what's happening. So yeah, so that actually, that time on scene is really important. Sir.
What are your limits for not doing?
Well, the book has us basically down to a statute mile of visibility for operational visits, operational missions, but I can waive everything down to 0. So Zach just came from Alaska. Taking off in the snow is not too far from 0. You probably had some pretty crazy cases where you had to.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think the runway's around here somewhere.
I know we had well, let's do a short story, but I stood duty on Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, like exactly at midnight, we got a phone call that a lady on the north end of Kodiak Island, which would normally be a 5-minute flight from where we were stationed, on a beautiful day would literally take us 5 minutes. Was having some sort of medical issue or the doctors basically said like she needs to go now. She was just in a cabin on the north end of Kodiak Island, and the weather was so bad that it took us about an hour and 40 minutes to get to her, and it was a 5-minute flight, and we were hover taxiing pretty much the entire way to get to her, navigating long ways around little water inlets and passages that we don't normally fly through, just to, keep some reference. And then we got there and it was so turbulent and visibility was so poor that it took us probably another hour just to get the hoist. We had to send our rescue swimmer down to the beach with a sled. He had to hike to her cabin, load her into a sled, pull her back to the beach. We were literally tucked into a cove that like we could not move from where we were, or we would just get rocked by turbulence. Like we found a little mountain basically to hide behind, and we just hovered there for like an hour, and then hover taxied all the way back. And so there's definitely like tons of risk discussion that go into these things. Like we don't just go do them willy-nilly. And that's, where a captain is really weighing in with the aircraft commanders, and the whole crew is talking about it, and everybody comes to a decision of whether or not we can do this, because we will turn something down if it is outside of the realm of what we feel like we could safely do. But I will say that most of the time crews are so trained to do that bad weather stuff that we're able to figure out ways to mitigate the risk to where we can do it. It might take us a lot longer to do it, but we can still do it. So
What's sea state?
there's not really limit for training. There are limitations for sea state, but for effecting rescue, there's nothing that I'm aware of.
Just not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the way that we do our risk is, it's kind of basically done in sections. So the first part is before they leave the ground, that's really up to me. But as soon as they get in the air, that's up to them. So I can't, they're in the air, they got the call, but it's usually on the ground. I've got a little bit, especially if it's rock, like, thunderstorms or really bad icing, something like that. Like the aircraft commander and I will do an assessment along with the ops boss, just to make sure that we're being smart about this. And the reason why there's different layers is because, like, if you're getting a call, like especially for like a newer aircraft commander, like I want to put me in, it's fine, we go. And their brain is thinking, all right, this is how I'm going to do this is how I'm going to go. And then you've got the operations officer who's probably been flying for about like 15, 18 years. It's okay, this is what I'm thinking, you guys should be doing this. But then it comes up to me as kind of the final, like, all right, are you comfortable with all this? Like, give us the kind of like, I'm like the dad who has to figure out if this truly is something that we need to be doing, or most importantly, what needs to change in order to bring this risk down. And we do that quite often, especially when the icing, low visibility, that's the part that we really have to go.
I'm sure that the human factors decision making model is so
It's-
complex. and
it-
you must get a lot of training that way.
It
as to
is.
what- Not just what brings it down, but what would make it a no-go. You know what I mean? There's that, the other side of that coin, not
There's
what's gonna send, push your word.
So we call it, so it's great. We get trained, we get talked about this a lot. So I gotta tell you, like, it's probably not great, but when we started, especially if you watch like the finest hours, when the crew said, hey, you gotta go out, but you gotta come back. That is not the case.
Yeah.
We've moved up way far from that. And two, before we're no longer have like the one aircraft commander, the old salty one sitting in one of the seats and tell them the new co-pilots, hey, sit on your hands, do what I do, and sit and do exactly what I tell you. Those days are gone. So once you get inside of the aircraft, rank goes away. Doesn't matter if you're a first class petty officer, you've been in the Coast Guard 2 days, you've been in for 25 years. Doesn't matter. Everybody's got an equal voice. Aircraft commander, of course, gets 51% of the vote. But other than that, so it really, we do training a lot of it. We call it CRM, or crew resource management. I'm sure you guys talk about this. And the whole goal, the easiest way to try to describe it is, think of like a block of Swiss cheese. So we call it the Swiss cheese model. What piece of Swiss cheese can we move so the bad thing that's happening doesn't all the holes line up and the bad thing happens? So that's really what we do. The conversations that happen inside of the aircraft before are endless. They're always chopped. Believe me, Airedales are a bunch of little chatty cats. They talk all the time. And it's really, really good. That is one thing I'm really proud of our crews, is if something does come up, they do say something. In fact, actually, one of our air crews was honored recently by the HII. It's called the Land and Live Award, and he was recognized internationally for him standing up and saying something. That come to actually turned down a mission, flew back because he felt something weird. Come to find out, one of the fuel tanks was loose, and that would have been bad.
Yeah.
So no, he saved that mission that day. It's because he said something, the air crew listened, the pilots listened, and turned back around and went. Yeah, so it's that is one thing that we actually have put a lot of effort into.
That's great.
Yeah, it is great.
That's a sea change in the last 3 decades.
It's a big thing. Yeah, it's where we are. We're where we should be. I mean, of course, we always have something to do, always have something to learn, and always get better, but we're much better than we were in the past. Any other questions? All right. Thank you much.
Good.
Good.
Nice to see you guys.
Well, that was